I knew the axe was coming the second he leaned on my cubicle wall like he owned oxygen. New VP, slick suit, teeth too white for someone who's never missed a bonus. Sweetheart, he says, because of course he does, your little handshake diplomacy thing? Cute. But we're moving into a more scalable model. Translation, you're fired, but I'll do it with a grin so you think it's a compliment. 10 minutes later, I'm in a glass fishbowl with HR. Staring at a severance information packet they slid over like it was a birthday card. My badge is deactivated before I've even finished signing the exit form. They hand me a branded tote bag, logo front and center, as if corporate swag will patch over the fact that they just gutted 37 enterprise accounts with one lazy pen stroke. As I walked past my desk for the last time, I let my fingers brush the spine of my dog-eared Lighthouse binder. That binder's been with me through 2 recessions, a pandemic, and more red-eye flights than my optometrist wants to know about. Inside are 15 years of proprietary relationship maps, renewal scripts, and the kind of client trust you can't log in Salesforce. The same binder he just called replaceable. 3 of those accounts, the whales, have key person riders in their contracts. My name, spelled out in black and white. No me, no contract. The VP didn't even blink. Somewhere in his buzzword blender brain, he thinks AI touchpoints can replace a 6 a.m. coffee with a client whose kid's science fair project you sponsored. On my monitor was a sticky note that had been there for years. Check Section 12C. I wrote it during a late-night contract review after a different exec tried to cut me out of a deal I'd closed. That clause is my quiet insurance policy. When I fought tooth and nail for in a conference room no one remembers now. I smiled when I saw it because I already knew this was going to be interesting. Oh, and before I keep going, apparently 97% of you are listening to stories like this without hitting that subscribe button. Come on, it's free, and it lets my team keep serving up these corporate train wrecks with extra butter. They think silence means surrender. But silence means I'm counting the days until renewal dates hit, counting how long until the first termination notice arrives, counting every mistake they make now that they've handed my accounts to someone whose idea of relationship management is a webinar with bad lighting. I didn't beg, didn't argue, didn't even look back at the VP. He's the kind of man who thinks winning is hearing himself talk louder than you. My win will be quieter, paper cuts, measured and timed, until he's standing in a boardroom, wondering why the air feels so thin. So I walked out, heels clicking on tile, tote bag swinging at my side. The security guard gave me that half-sympathetic nod reserved for people who just lost their job but didn't deserve to. In my head, I was already laying out the next steps. Dust off the Lighthouse license agreements, pull the last 3 years of revenue numbers for those whales, make sure every confidential file is backed up where it belongs, on my side of the fence. Because here's the thing about being replaceable, sweetheart, the people who say it never bothered to read the fine print. And Section 12C? That's not fine print. That's a loaded gun with a hair trigger, and they just handed it to me. By the time my tote bag hit the passenger seat of my car, I knew exactly how they'd handle transitioning my accounts. Sure enough, 2 days later, word got back to me from an old friend still on the inside. The VP had rolled out his grand retention plan, a single webinar, and a string of mass emails written like bad press releases. No personal check-ins, no remembering the client's kid's name, no handwritten thank you notes after contract renewals. Just glossy PDFs and the hollow confidence of someone who thinks engagement is measured in click-through rates. Client #1 was the first to blink. By blink, I mean send a beautifully polite, nuclear-grade email to the contract's inbox. Per Section 14.2, due to the key person change, we are exercising our right to terminate for convenience, effective immediately. The kind of line that, when you've been in the game long enough, you can hear being read in a lawyer's voice. It was less a goodbye and more a formal obituary for the VP's career longevity. I couldn't help it, I laughed. It wasn't exactly, more like the gallows humor of watching someone burn down the barn to swat a fly. That account alone was worth more in annual revenue than his entire department's combined salary. I'd spent 7 years building it brick by brick, flew out for a last-minute dinner when their procurement officer's husband fell ill, sat through a 3-hour opera in a city I couldn't pronounce just to close the gap on a renewal. And now, gone in the time it took them to click send. So I baked a pie, peach bourbon, my grandmother's recipe. When it came out of the oven, I scrawled cost of doing business in whipped cream across the top and took a photo. I almost mailed it to their office, but decided the joke was better left in my kitchen. The part that would make them choke if they knew? Those key person riders weren't some freebie the company dreamed up. I negotiated everyone myself, sometimes dragging legal into calls they hated, sometimes waiting out procurement until they caved. They're rare in corporate contracts for a reason. Companies don't like being handcuffed to an actual human. But my whales insisted on them, because they knew what they were buying wasn't just a service, it was me. In the old days, I kept renewal dates scrawled on a wall calendar in my cubicle, circled in thick red Sharpie. It was part talisman, part scoreboard. That calendar's hanging in my home office now, and I can see exactly what's about to happen, in big looping handwriting. Client #2, Renewal notice due in 9 days. Client hash 315. I don't even need to call them. The clock's ticking for free. I could almost picture the VP in his corner office, spinning his ergonomic chair toward the window, while explaining to the CEO that some churn is normal during leadership transitions. That's what amateurs call losing a customer you thought was a captive audience. Pros like me, we call it a slow bleed, and this was just the first drop. That night, I opened my old files and skimmed through the writers again. Clean, tight, airtight. I drafted them to survive not just bad leadership, but leadership too arrogant to know they were the problem. The whales didn't need me to reach out, they knew the drill. My departure wasn't a hiccup, it was a tripwire. 3 days later, my personal phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. When I picked up, I heard a familiar voice, warm, measured, and loaded with subtext. Hey, just checking in, are you okay? The kind of question that wasn't about my health at all. They were fishing, but politely, to see if I was available. I smiled into the receiver. The bleed had begun. And there's nothing management hates more than realizing the wound isn't going to clot. It didn't take long for the silence to turn into something you could almost hear humming, like the air before a storm. 9 days after client hash 1 walked, client hash 2 sent their own formal goodbye. No emotion, no fluff. Just, pursuant to Section 11(b), we are terminating effective immediately due to key person change. They didn't even bother to ask about the transition plan because they knew there wasn't one. That account had been my baby since the ink dried on their first contract. I'd gotten their CFO to renew during the 2009 downturn by sending him a care package of bourbon and the exact cigars he smoked at his wedding. Now, the entire deal vanished into the legal ether with the click of a mouse. Client hash 3 didn't wait for their renewal date. 4 days later, their termination notice landed in legal's inbox with a timestamp so close to lunchtime, I could picture the paralegal reading it over a turkey sandwich. Same reason cited. Same signature block. Another 7-figure account gone, and all the VP had to show for it was a webinar replay nobody watched past slide 4. Inside, it was chaos. My friend in ops described it like watching a kitchen catch fire, while the head chef insists the smell is fine. Leadership ordered a rapid response plan, which was code for endless meetings where everyone argued about messaging instead of fixing the core problem, that the clients weren't buying services, they were buying me. That's when the real comedy started. The CEO's assistant, who had never once spoken to me directly in all my years there, sent an email with the subject line, "Urgent, need your retention scripts ASAP." No hi, no hope you're well. Just an expectation that I'd drop everything and hand over the very thing I'd fought to keep mine, Lighthouse. They had no clue those scripts weren't company property. Every year, without fail, I licensed them to the company for 12 months at a negotiated rate. That rate got tucked into an additional services clause in my contract, signed off by prior counsel who actually knew how to read. The day they walked me out was the day that license expired. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled my own copies from storage, work logs, email chains, the signed Lighthouse license addenda going back a decade. Each one marked employee-originated methodology, licensed, not assigned. My performance reviews backed it up too. Her proprietary relationship framework has resulted in X% retention and Y% upsell. They weren't even shy about calling it proprietary. They just assumed proprietary meant ours. I spread the paperwork across my dining table like a general laying out battle plans. This wasn't revenge yet, it was preservation. You don't swing until you've indexed every receipt, every signature, every timestamp. Then my phone lit up. Caller ID the company. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Per your contract, the CEO's voice barked before I could even say hello, you are required to return immediately. You can and will sue to compel performance if necessary. His tone was gravel and caffeine, the kind of voice you hear in a man who's been awake for too many nights realizing he bet on the wrong horse. I let him talk. I let him think he was dictating terms. I didn't correct him. I didn't mention that Section 12(c) was sitting highlighted in my copy of the contract like a loaded trap. Instead, I gave him something he didn't expect. Fine, I said. Let's read the contract together. I could almost hear his jaw tighten on the other end. The silence that followed wasn't confusion, it was the faint awareness of a man stepping onto thin ice without realizing it's already cracking. The invitation came through as a calendar block titled Emergency Strategy Session Mandatory Attendance. I accepted without comment and replied with one line, "Please confirm counsel will be present." No way was I stepping into their boardroom without a witness whose job it was to read the same language I was about to hand them. That morning, I dressed the way I do when I know I'm going to war, but intend to look like I'm going to brunch, neutral silk blouse, navy blazer, no jewelry except my wedding band. I carried 2 things: a slim leather folio holding 3 pristine copies of my employment agreement, and a separate folder marked in block Sharpie, Lighthouse license agreements complete. The folio was for show, the folder was the loaded weapon. When I walked into the boardroom, the temperature felt a few degrees too cold, the way HVAC always does in rooms where people make bad decisions they hope to blame on someone else. The CEO was already at the head of the table, tie slightly askew, coffee in a paper cup instead of his usual stainless tumbler. Small details, but telling. The VP was there too, leaning back in his chair with that smirk that says, "This is all just a formality, and you're about to play your part." HR sat to the side, lips pressed together, shuffling papers they didn't need to shuffle. And sure enough, every few seconds, the HR director made that little throat-clearing sound I've learned to translate as, "We stepped in it, and I know it, but I'm not going to say it out loud." The CEO opened the meeting with pure bluster, projecting his voice like we were in a stadium instead of a glass-walled room. He threw around words like breach, obligation, and critical operational need. The VP occasionally nodded along, as if his agreement gave weight to anything. When the CEO paused for breath, I laid my folio on the table, unzipped it slowly, and slid a copy of my employment agreement toward him, one toward the general counsel, and one toward the HR director. "Let's read it together," I said evenly. I reached into my blazer pocket and produced two yellow sticky flags, placing one on Section 12C and another on Exhibit D, the section titled Employee-Originated Accounts. I didn't say what was in them, I didn't need to. The point was to make counsel's eyes go exactly where I wanted them, without distraction. The general counsel adjusted his glasses and started reading. At first, his eyes moved quickly, the way people skim when they think they already know what they'll find. But then his pen, which had been tapping idly on the table, slowed and stopped. His lips began moving silently, like he was reading the same line twice just to make sure he hadn't hallucinated it. He glanced at Exhibit D, then back to Section 12C, then up at me with an expression that was no longer neutral. The VP's smirk faltered just a hair, enough for me to catch it. HR had stopped shuffling papers entirely. "I'd like to make sure everyone here understands," I said, voice still calm, "that Section 12C was negotiated after prior leadership attempted to reassign my accounts without acknowledgement or credit. It outlines specific conditions for what happens when the company terminates me without cause and then attempts to compel my continued service." I tapped the yellow flag on Exhibit D, and Exhibit D identifies which accounts are defined as employee-originated. Those are the same accounts the company has been trying to retain for the last 2 weeks unsuccessfully. The CEO leaned back slightly, as if physical distance from the paper would change the words printed on it. The general counsel kept reading, slower now, as if every sentence weighed more than the last. And behind his glasses, I saw it, the storm building. The moment when a lawyer realizes the client who thought they were in control just walked into their own trap. I didn't rush him. Storms are more powerful when they have room to gather force. The general counsel finally set his pen down, flattening his palm over Section 12C like he was holding it in place to keep the words from running off the page. His voice was slower now, deliberate, as he read aloud for the room. "Upon termination without cause. 1. Non-compete and non-solicit dissolve with respect to employee-originated accounts. 2. Any attempt to compel service triggers a mandatory buyout equal to 2.5 times the trailing 12-month revenue from those accounts. 3. Continued use of Lighthouse materials post-termination without license constitutes willful infringement with fee shifting." He stopped, adjusted his glasses again, and read it silently one more time. I could see the shape of the realization moving through him, first curiosity, then disbelief, then that quiet, resigned understanding lawyers get when they know the other side isn't just holding a trump card, they're holding the whole deck. For me, the emotion wasn't gloating, it was vindication braided with something sadder. I hadn't written that clause because I wanted a war. I'd written it because once, years ago, another VP tried to strip my accounts and hand them to his golfing buddy, and the only thing that stopped him was me refusing to sign my renewal without a carve-out. I'd fought for those words like someone fights to keep their own name. All I'd ever wanted was credit, recognition for the fact that my accounts weren't just company assets, they were relationships I'd grown, guarded, and bled for. I remembered the night I got the email from old counsel. "It's unusual, but it's enforceable. If they sign, you're bulletproof." I kept that email, printed it, filed it in a red folder, and tucked it behind my Lighthouse agreements. That folder was sitting on the chair beside me right now, its corner just visible under my jacket sleeve. The VP, still trying to project control, let out a soft laugh, more exhale than sound, and muttered something about overly generous language that wouldn't hold up. Counsel didn't even look at him. Instead, he turned to HR, his voice low enough to make the entire table lean in. "Did you terminate her without cause?" HR didn't answer right away. The director shifted in her seat, glanced at the CEO, and then down at the table. The silence was enough. It wasn't the defensive, "we'll check the record" kind of pause. It was the pause of someone who already knew the record would hang them. The CEO broke the moment by clearing his throat and flipping through the agreement as if another page might change the one in front of him. But he wasn't fooling anyone, least of all me. The math was already forming in counsel's head. 3 whales, trailing 12-month revenue in the high 7 figures, multiplied by 2.5, plus statutory damages for willful IP infringement if they'd touched Lighthouse since my last paid license. It was the kind of number that makes board members whisper and shareholders ask why no one saw this coming. I sat perfectly still, letting the weight of it settle. In my mind, I could hear the clock ticking, not the one on the wall, but the one that had started running the second they walked me out. The buyout clock, the damages clock, the we've just made a very expensive mistake clock. The VP glanced at me again, maybe looking for some sign that I'd waver. But I didn't. I wasn't here to beg for my job back or to trade insults. I was here to watch them read their own signatures and realize exactly what they'd agreed to. And now they had. The room went still for a beat too long, the kind of pause where everyone's trying to figure out who speaks next without admitting they're the one in trouble. Finally, the general counsel broke the silence with a single instruction to finance: pull the trailing 12-month revenue for the 3 employee-originated accounts listed in Exhibit D. Now, a junior analyst in a navy suit slipped out of the boardroom, laptop already open, moving like someone who knew this wasn't just busy work, it was a live grenade. 10 minutes later, he was back, pale and tight-lipped, whispering the numbers to the CFO, who didn't even try to hide the way his shoulders slumped. The total was announced like a confession: a high 7-figure revenue stream, multiplied by 2.5 per Section 12C. The buyout number didn't just land, it crushed the air out of the room. You could almost hear the gears turning in their heads, converting that figure into quarters of profit destroyed and executive bonuses gone. Before they could regroup, ops made things worse. We did use her Lighthouse scripts last week, one manager said hesitantly, like a kid admitting they'd broken a window but thought maybe it wouldn't be noticed. Every head turned toward me. I reached into my folder and slid a single-page document across the table, the most recent Lighthouse license agreement, clearly stating the expiration date, the exact day they walked me out. No renewal invoice paid. No extension signed, which meant every use since then wasn't just a breach, it was willful infringement. Fee shifting mandatory. From my bag, I pulled the access logs. I had security alerts in place for post-termination access, I said softly. Here's your login history for the shared drive where my template's live. Timestamps, IP addresses, user IDs. My voice didn't rise, didn't crack. I kept it low, steady, because I've learned that when you speak softly in a room full of men who think volume equals control, they have to lean in. And when they lean in, they're listening. The CFO scanned the logs, his pen starting to click fast. Counsel took the page from him, read it once, and then set it face down like the paper itself might burn him. The CEO rubbed his temple. The VP still hadn't said a word, but the smirk was long gone, replaced by the vacant stare of someone trying to remember how the game works when all the pieces are suddenly against him. I let the silence hang for a few beats longer before I opened the leather folio again and laid down 2 envelopes, neatly labeled. Option A, Option B. I slid them forward, side by side, like a magician revealing the final trick. Option A, I began. You retain me as an independent consultant at $900 an hour, 200-hour minimum, payable in advance. The VP resigns. You issue a public apology for role misclassification and reinstate the Lighthouse license for 12 months at triple the previous rate. I tap the second envelope. Option B, I decline. I join a competitor who has already papered so's with my 3 whales. You wire the buyout amount, plus infringement damages, by Friday at 5 p.m. My tone never changed, my smile polite but thin. It wasn't anger anymore, it was arithmetic. Numbers with teeth, and now they knew exactly how hard those teeth could bite. I rested my fingertips lightly on the 2 envelopes between us, the way a card shark hovers over a winning hand. You can open them now, or you can open them later, I said evenly, but the clock's running either way. Option A, printed in neat bullet points, left them a narrow escape hatch. Retain me as an independent consultant at $900 an hour, a 200-hour minimum paid in advance, no net 30 games. The VP's resignation, effective immediately, to be announced with the same cheerful internal memo they'd used to welcome him. A public apology for role misclassification that would read like a corporate humility post, but double as a warning to anyone else who thought they could outmaneuver me. And, my favorite, the immediate reinstatement of the Lighthouse license for 12 months at triple the previous rate, invoiced today, payable today. Option B was cleaner, bloodier. I walk straight across the street to the rival who has already papered so's with my 3 whales. They've signed, sealed, and dated them. I'm the named key person again. The buyout amount from Section 12, C plus willful infringement fees, wired by Friday, 5 p.m. No negotiations, no extensions, no second chances. I slid the envelopes forward close enough that the board members could see the labels. I didn't open them, didn't need to. Paper has weight and weight speaks. I saw the CFO glance at the slightly thicker envelope, Option B, and then look away, like staring at it too long might make it real. The VP finally found his voice, and it came out too loud, the way people sound when they're trying to drown out their own pulse. This is extortion, he barked, puffing himself up in the chair. The Lighthouse methodology is company property. You built it here. I didn't interrupt. I just tilted my head and looked at him like you might look at a dog barking at its own reflection. Then I turned slowly to counsel because I didn't need to answer, not when someone else could do it for me. Counsel didn't even glance at the VP. He picked up my contract, flipped to Exhibit D. Read aloud. Lighthouse proprietary methodology, licensed annually by mutual agreement. Ownership remains with the employee-originated account holder. He set the page down, looked directly at the VP and said, "It's not yours." The words landed like a gavel. The VP started to speak again, but counsel cut him off. And continuing to use those materials without a current license, he trailed off, adjusted his glasses, and looked at me. "You have access logs." I slid them over without a word. The timestamped logins sat on the table like fingerprints at a crime scene. Counsel nodded once, like he just mentally recalculated the damages figure. I smiled then, not the kind of smile you give a friend, but the kind that flickers in a blackout, sudden and sharp, letting everyone know the lights aren't coming back on until you decide they do. "Choose wisely," I said. The clock's already halfway through its last tick. And then I sat back, letting the hum of fluorescent lights fill the silence, waiting to see which envelope they had the stomach to touch first. The VP must have thought doubling down was his best bet, because he leaned forward, elbows on the table, and spat it out again, louder this time, like volume could turn fiction into fact. "Lighthouse is company property. It was developed here with our resources. It belongs to us." Counsel didn't even sigh. He just turned the pages of my contract slowly, deliberately, until he reached Exhibit D. His voice was crisp when he read it aloud. "Lighthouse proprietary methodology, licensed annually by mutual agreement. Ownership remains with the employee-originated account holder." He closed the binder with a quiet thud and looked at the VP the way a teacher looks at a kid who just failed a test they had the answers to for weeks. The CEO's hand was shaking now, not from anger but from something worse, realization. HR, still glued to the chair, spoke so softly I almost didn't catch it. We reused her scripts. Her eyes flicked to me, then to counsel, like she was hoping one of us would say it didn't matter. Counsel didn't. Instead, he muttered something under his breath that was just loud enough for me to hear. "Oh my God." And it wasn't blasphemy, it was math. The damages calculation had just tripled in his head. I felt no rush of anger, no adrenaline spike. What settled into my bones instead was a clean, cold peace. This wasn't personal anymore, it was arithmetic. They weren't enemies, they were line items, and I knew exactly how to tally them. From my folder, I drew two more pieces of paper. One was a set of board meeting minutes from 3 years back, signed by the corporate secretary, noting Lighthouse as a third-party methodology license from my name during a strategy session. The other was the original origin memo, signed by me, witnessed by old counsel, stating I developed the framework independently before joining the company. These weren't just documents, they were anchors. Once on the table, they kept the truth from drifting anywhere convenient. The VP went quiet, the fight leaking out of him in slow drips. The CEO leaned back, looking like a man trying to see a way out of a locked room without touching the door. HR's gaze was fixed on the invoice pad I just pulled from my folio. I wrote in silence, one page, no fluff. The buyout amount per Section 12C, the calculated infringement fees for every unauthorized use of Lighthouse post-termination, the total circled in ink dark enough to bleed through the back. At the bottom, I wrote the deadline, Friday, 5 o'clock p.m. Then I slid it across the table, the paper making that faint whisper sound that always follows the sharp edge of a decision. No speeches, no dramatics, just the number, the clause citation, and the date. That was all the air left in the room, and it was mine. I leaned forward, one fingertip resting on the exact sentence in Section 12. See, the CEO had been so eager to invoke when he called me days earlier. "This is the line you thought would force me back," I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through the stale boardroom air. "What it actually says is that any attempt to compel my service after a termination without cause triggers the mandatory buyout and dissolves every restrictive covenant tied to my accounts." Counsel didn't speak right away, but his nod was slow, deliberate, and final. It wasn't just agreement, it was concession. The fight was over, even if no one had announced it yet. The CEO's jaw worked as if chewing on gravel. Finally, he asked, "What would it take to make this go away?" There was no menace in the question now, just exhaustion. I didn't hesitate. I tapped the thicker of the two envelopes, option B, and stood. That one, no one reached for it. They didn't need to. They knew exactly what was inside, the buyout total, the infringement damages, and the knowledge that my 3 whales were already signed, sealed, and ready under a rival's banner. I felt no flare of victory, no vindictive rush. Just the cool, clean satisfaction of a transaction closing exactly as written. Bridges weren't burning here, they were being itemized, one invoice at a time. For the final stroke, I let them have the truth they'd been avoiding. "The whales didn't choose your logo," I said, sliding the invoice closer. "They chose me, and my rival's welcome packet is already in my car." The VP started to open his mouth, maybe to throw one last scrap of ego into the void, but the CEO caught sight of the circled total on the bill and cut him off with a curt, "Close it." I left the invoice on the table. Left the silence that came with it. Left them staring at the kind of number you can't wish away with an all-hands pep talk. By the time the wire hit my account, my old badge wouldn't open the lobby turnstile anymore. And my calendar, already full. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.